What's up, everybody? Alex here with a fresh cup of coffee. So I went back and I checked, and it was roughly about 2 years ago that I decided to focus part of my collecting on New York City baseball and its heyday. So somewhere between the late 1940s into the late 50s, early 60s, but primarily focusing on the rivalry between the three great teams of that era, being the New York Yankees, the Brooklyn Dodgers, and the New York Giants, all of whom were at the top of their game and were usually in the World Series during that time period. So here we are 2 years in, and I thought this would be a good time to take a moment to see how this collection is progressing and just sort of reflect on how the experience has been putting this together, what my approach has been, and where all of this is headed. I'm a Phillies fan, first and foremost. I grew up a couple hours outside of Philly and was cursed, and sometimes blessed, to forever tie my love of the game to that team. I have no interest in the Yankees, the Dodgers, or the Giants in their current form, and I'd really only root for LA or San Francisco in the sense that I'll root for the National League over the American League any day. I respect all those teams, even though we all know it's fun to hate the Yankees, and don't get me started on the Mets. But aside from all that, I don't really pay much attention to those current franchises. So, where exactly does this New York baseball love come from? How does a Philly fan justify collecting New York baseball cards? I can trace it to two sources. The first is Ken Burns. I first watched parts of the now legendary baseball documentary as a young teenager with my father on PBS. I can still remember the mind-blowing shock when I discovered through that documentary that Los Angeles was not where the Dodgers had always been. It was quite surreal as a kid to see the players wearing Dodger uniforms but with a big white B on their caps. Burns spends quite a bit of time on the Dodger narrative in that series, from its origins to its heyday and then to its painful transition from Brooklyn to LA. Of course, as an adult, I can see why he did this. It was a compelling story. It's one that takes you on an emotional journey of highs and lows through the decades with a powerful resolution, and it serves as a conduit for all the stories that exist in baseball. The Brooklyn story is enthralling, it's heartbreaking, there's something nostalgic, endearing, American about all of it. Even as a kid watching the series, I wanted to go there. I wanted Ebbets Field to still exist. And it wasn't just the Dodgers. Willie Mays in New York, yet another team that had a history I knew nothing about. Watching Mays play in grainy black and white footage in the Polo Grounds, I wanted to go there too. Mickey Mantle and Roger Maris and Yogi Berra and the Scooter in New York, Vin Scully and Red Barber calling games, cab drivers and post office workers arguing over Mickey, Willie, and the Duke. Quite simply, Ken Burns did justice to the golden age of baseball in New York, and it got its hooks into me at an early age. So the second reason I love this era so much, flash forward about 15 years in my life, and I find myself in New York, working in Manhattan, but living in Brooklyn. I remember one time revisiting the Ken Burns doc, and then walking outside one day in my Brooklyn neighborhood. I felt like I was looking at my surroundings with a different perspective. Sure, it was the 21st century, but I saw the Brooklyn of the past, the space where all of these great stories had taken place. Ebbets Field and the Polo Grounds were long gone, but the connection I made to those times felt stronger and more meaningful living in Brooklyn. I thought about it a lot anytime I went to Citi Field or Yankee Stadium to catch a game. So that's it, I guess. I never saw any of those guys play. I wasn't there when it happened. I'm not even originally from New York, nor do I have any relatives with memories of those teams. But you know what? I never saw Christy Mathewson or Ty Cobb play, and that doesn't stop me from delving into pre-war as a collector and a student of the game. I think we get called to one part of baseball history or another. It's like a magnet that draws us in. The reason behind it can make a lot of sense, or maybe no sense at all. But whatever it is, the joy is always in the stories, in the history, the legends that live on through the cardboard. For me, New York baseball in the 50s is a well that I know will never run dry. I can go to it again and again, and come back with my love of the game and the hobby refreshed and renewed. So my collection of these New York teams, the Yankees, the Dodgers, and the Giants, is mostly from the 1950s. It will from time to time go backwards into the 40s. The Dodgers and the Giants are going to stop around 1957, of course, but there will be some Yankees that dip into the early 60s for sure. In terms of which cards I'm targeting, whether it's a star player, a key contributor to the New York City baseball story, or just a common player, all the cards in my collection are cards that I find visually appealing and that I think go well together. For more on this idea, you can check out a video I did a while back with Terry from TJ Maxx Vintage Cards, which I'll leave a link to in the description below. I made the decision pretty early on that I don't want to collect cards that I don't like. Maybe that sounds obvious or dumb, or maybe it's blunt, but I'm not going to get a card that the hobby deems important if I don't like it myself. I don't do player runs, and I'm not a completionist, at least not when it comes to this PC. It's an ever-evolving thing, but it's my thing, and that's what I think makes it the most fun. I've got a list of cards that I continually check. Cards get added to it, cards come off the list. Which cards go on the list and stay off of it is entirely up to me. It's something that I work on without end, and for me, it's one of the most enjoyable parts of collecting. I put my collecting through a lot of scrutiny, which may sound like a lot of work or just not fun to some people, but I get a lot of pleasure out of curating this thing. No one else is going to have a collection quite like mine. It's entirely of my making. It's my taste. It's what matters to me and what doesn't, what I personally respond to as a fan and as a collector and a lover of the history of the game. And ultimately, it's what makes it unique, for better or worse. Others may disagree here and there, but hey, that just gives us all something to chat about. That's how I collect. One of the things that has really made building this more fun is that there's a lot of flexibility built into how I go after the cards. If I want, I can save up and target a big card on my list. Or if I want to go easy on the hobby budget, I can aim for the low-hanging fruit. I'm excited about every card I get, whether it's a big boy card or a common card. One of the wonderful byproducts of collecting, of course, is the knowledge that you gain over time. As much of a fan as I am of these teams and this time period, my knowledge of it barely scratches the surface. But as I collect each card, the overall picture becomes more and more clear. There's always more to learn, more books to read, more cards to discover, more stories to enjoy. So it's not just about acquiring cards. I'm building an experience for myself as well, and I'm glad to be here on YouTube to try and share some of it with you all as well. So, that's where things are so far with my New York collection. I can't see this thing slowing down anytime soon. There will always be cards on the list to consider, new cards to discover, and new stories to enjoy. I would say it's a pretty modest collection so far. Some collectors might look at this and see big holes, massive, big-time cards that I don't yet have. And you know what? They're totally right, and I'll try to get to some of those at some point. But what I see when I look at this is all the fun I've been having, and really, just a bunch of damn good-looking cards. Thanks for checking out the video, guys. Take care, and I'll talk to you all soon.